On a typical school day, Haruka sits alone at his desk, fully embracing his role as the class loner. It's not like it bothers him, he actually prefers it this way. The alternative, socializing with his classmates, a thought that makes his skin crawl. The room is a minefield of cliques. The delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then the rest completely irrelevant. Haruka doesn't fit in with any of them, and he's more than happy about it. More time to focus on his books, less time dealing with people. But today, his peaceful reading session is rudely interrupted by something unexpected. A bright light flares up beneath him. It's a summoning circle, slowly materializing beneath the classroom. For a split second, Haruka feels a thrill. This could be the start of an Isekai adventure. Then dread kicks in. Anyone who's read enough Isekai knows what that means. He's about to get royally screwed. No way is he getting dragged into some fantasy mess. So, he bolts. He rushes to the door, but it's magically sealed, refusing to budge. As the portal finishes forming, his classmates begin disappearing, vanishing one by one like they're being Thanos snapped out of existence. Desperate, Haruka scrambles into the ceiling vents, thinking he's outsmarted the system. But nope, the summoning circle isn't done with him yet. It follows him into the vents, and just like that, he's sucked into the portal anyway. After a less than epic arrival in the new world and getting stuck with leftover abilities, Haruka is dumped in the middle of a dense forest, with zero survival skills to speak of. Luckily, a pouch appears on the ground, a part of his newfound Minecraft villager skill. The pouch holds an infinite inventory, already stocked with beginner gear. At least he won't die in the first 10 minutes. Gearing up, Haruka checks his stats, only to discover he has to roll for them with a pair of gambling dice. Resigned to his fate, he rolls the dice and ends up with the letter M. Confused but too tired to care, he throws all his M points into his luck stat, maxing it out. Useful? Not really. Better than nothing? Absolutely. As he sifts through his skills, he realizes two things. First, thanks to his stellar track record as a loner, he's cursed with the inability to form a party. Ever. Second, to make up for that, he now has a unique ability that forces monsters to serve him. With his classmates nowhere to be found, Haruka briefly wonders why they didn't land in the same spot. But then again, he didn't care about them before, so why start now? His attention shifts to surviving in the forest, though he's painfully aware that any run-in with a monster will probably end in disaster. Then, he remembers his contact lens skill. Slipping them on, his vision floods with useful data, like a real-life HUD. The lenses come with an appraisal feature, so he can now easily spot edible mushrooms without accidentally poisoning himself. He fills his villager pouch with supplies and heads to a nearby river to stock up on water. While exploring, Haruka stumbles upon a small cave. Intrigued, he cautiously steps inside, mentally preparing for a jump scare monster encounter. To his relief, the cave is empty and surprisingly roomy, perfect for a makeshift camp. He pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his pouch, transforming the cave into a cozy base. A little temperature control magic later, and he's got a fire going. Bonus: using the magic unlocks new fire-related abilities, and his cautious nature unlocks some handy detection skills. But despite all that, Haruka's only real weapon is still just a stick. If he wants to make it out here, he'll need to find a way to level up his combat game fast. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, nerves practically buzzing as he scrambles out of his tent. To his relief, it seems he survived the night without any monster drama thanks to the anti-monster magic properties of his surprisingly useful skill items. However, being safe from harm doesn't exactly mean he's safe from hunger. So, he pulls out a frying pan and cooks up some mushrooms he gathered yesterday. You might be wondering where he got a frying pan. It was just chilling in his villager bag, alongside a full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far, that bag has been the MVP of his new life, leaving Haruka to wonder just what kind of villager stocked it up before he arrived. Having downed his mushroom breakfast, he knows he needs a game plan. After a stroll outside to gather his thoughts, he decides that the cave will serve as a solid base of operations. Still, he needs to figure out a reliable food source and some safety measures against any pesky monsters that might take a liking to him. Luckily, his contact lenses make finding food easy, and he quickly gathers more mushrooms and herbs. But the monster problem, that still needs addressing. Just then, Ara's detection skill kicks in, alerting him to some commotion nearby. Curious, he heads over and is horrified to discover a pair of goblins causing the ruckus. One goblin would be bad enough, but two with strength stats higher than his own. He briefly contemplates running away, but realizes that living in this forest means he's eventually going to have to deal with them if he wants to survive. So, he decides to take the plunge while he still has the element of surprise. That said, he's not convinced his stick will do the job alone, so he wraps it in some of his magical trash and gives it a whirl. To his surprise, it works better than expected. With a burst of confidence, he lunges from the bushes and strikes one goblin on the head. The little green creature is dazed, but Haruka doesn't stop there. He unleashes a flurry of strikes until the goblin finally drops. That's one down, but the other goblin isn't going down without a fight. As the second goblin charges, Haruka dodges its attack with newfound agility. Now that he's got a handle on its moves, he easily evades and counters, landing a well-timed smack before hitting it with a wave of magic. Victory tastes sweet. Having just won his first fight against goblins, he figures that's enough excitement for the day and heads back to the cave to rest. Once there, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and examines the club he looted from the goblin corpse. It has high damage potential, but is heavy and has a short range. For now, he decides to stick with his trusty stick. When he checks his stats, he's pleasantly surprised to see he leveled up from the fight, and all his stats have doubled as a result. The next morning, he rises for breakfast as usual, but he's starting to feel a bit tired of the mushroom diet. He yearns for meat, but hunting is on the horizon, and he knows he needs to boost his skills first. The first skill he wants to try is the magic fusion ability he acquired. In simple terms, it covers his body in magic, boosting his physical and magical defenses and significantly increasing his strength. This should make him a fighting machine. His appraisal skill has also upgraded to level 2, so he checks to see what's changed. To his frustration, all he finds are question marks next to the descriptions. It's like the game designers just threw in a mystery mechanic for fun. With that distraction out of the way, he heads outside for some magic training. On his way out, he spots something on the ground and picks it up, hoping it might be meat. Surprise, surprise, it's just another mushroom. Delusional optimism aside, Haruka realizes he won't be finding any meat lying around, so he pushes ahead with his training. Activating his mana infusion, he takes a step forward, only to be launched several meters ahead thanks to his newfound physical boost. His body feels lighter than air, and with little effort, he zips around the forest like he's on a magic carpet ride. Plus, his dexterity is through the roof, allowing him to strike with pinpoint precision. Feeling bold, he challenges two random goblins and, unlike yesterday, he knocks one out with a single hit. Confidence surging, he thinks he can take on even more goblins, but when he spots a trio of them, his bravado wavers. Deciding discretion is the better part of valor, he backs away slowly before he can get jumped. After a solid training session, he heads back to his cave to refine his magic. Apparently, he can make coffee tables with his magic now. Eventually, he reaches a point where he can one-shot a goblin and even create a proper table. Inspired, he uses his crafting magic to make a gate for his cave, allowing him to venture out at night. Finally feeling ready to hunt, he goes after a rabbit, having not tasted meat in ages. Just as he's about to cook it up, he spots something else nearby. At first, he thinks it's a goblin, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it's something even worse, his classmates from back home. No thanks, he thinks. Not dealing with them today. He tries to sneak away in the opposite direction, but soon realizes that the popular girls, the gym bros, and even the nerds are also around. The nerds aren't so bad. He used to hang out with them in school. but he's still not in the mood for social interaction. Finally, he spots the student council group, with the class rep among them. Despite his general aversion to his classmates, he can't deny that the class rep has always been nice to him. For a moment, he considers revealing himself and saying hello, but then he remembers how much he cherishes this newfound solitude. There are no idle chatter, no taxes, and no annoying classmates. He decides to officially ignore them and stick to his plan of conquering this world all by himself. Haruka dives into a bush, heart-pounding, as a gang of delinquents approaches. One of them, clearly convinced he heard something, moves in for a closer look. Haruka holds his breath, but when the guy checks inside, all he finds is a bunny, and they move along. Crisis averted. Relieved, but now curious, Haruka trails after them, hoping to pick up some valuable intel. Instead, he's treated to the intellectual masterpiece of a conversation about the class VP. Haruka rolls his eyes. He thought he'd at least learn something useful. He's a little worried about what the delinquents might do with no rules holding them back, but he figures the class rep will step in as always. Just as he's ready to call it a bust, Haruka overhears something more concerning. The delinquents are planning to use a mere call to summon Tanaka and his abilities, allowing them to do whatever they please. Haruka knows they're up to no good, but social interaction? Yeah, hard pass. So, he retreats to his cave to grill some mushrooms, only to be greeted with soul-crushing news. His loner skill leveled up. Even his status board has acknowledged his hermit lifestyle. Sure, it's probably because he's been avoiding everyone, but still ouch. He shrugs it off. It's not like it's the worst thing ever. Honestly, leveling up might be a good thing, given that he's still stuck at a measly level 3. The problem is his two deadweight skills, Jack of all trades and Dummy. He figures Jack of all trades means he'll be good at a little bit of everything, but never a master. Pretty straightforward. As for Dummy, he's got no clue, though he's half convinced it involves puppets. After a solid round of overthinking, he gives up and digs into his mushroom dinner, though he'd kill for some actual meat. Exhausted, he decides to call it a night. Just as he's about to drift off, a loud commotion erupts outside. Haruka tries to ignore it. He really does, but curiosity gets the better of him, and he drags himself up to check out the chaos. When Haruka emerged from his cave, he fully expected to see the usual delinquent shenanigans. But no plot twist, it's the nerd squad this time, tangling with a bunch of goblins. They're getting their butts kicked. For a second, Haruka thinks, maybe I should help, but then checks their stats. They're rocking level 16, while he's still stuck at a sad little level 3. Yeah, they'll be fine. Just as he's about to peace out, he spots two sneaky goblins closing in from behind. Great, now I gotta save their nerdy butts, he thinks. But then he remembers that one time they let him borrow their rare holographic Charizard card. That seals the deal. Haruka charges in, stick in hand, and with one heroic swing, he wipes out both goblins. The nerds are floored. Haruka, the hermit, out here saving the day. After an awkward reunion because socializing isn't exactly Haruka's strong suit, they all head back to his cave. The nerds are blown away by how cozy it is, especially considering it's a literal cave. Haruka shrugs it off, explaining he used some basic earth magic to upgrade the place. Still, they're impressed he managed it all by himself. After serving up some drinks, Haruka asks the big question. So, why are you nerds wandering the woods at night? Cue awkward silence. Finally, the truth spills out. They're on the run from the rest of the class. Apparently, after their class got ice-kai'd, chaos ensued. Some handled it better than others. The jocks were trying and failing to be useful. The popular girls were more annoyed than afraid. And the nerds? Well, they were thriving, finally living their best fantasy lives. Then came the goblins. Everyone else freaked out, but the nerds and the gym bros handled it like pros. Afterward, the class rep, who, shocker, actually has some common sense, organized everyone and set up camp by the river. The nerds taught them all how to survive. Everything was going smoothly. Until the popular girls hit them with a "nah" We're not doing any work." This, of course, inspired the delinquents to follow suit, leaving the nerds and the class rep to handle everything. But wait, it gets worse. The nerds overheard the delinquents' plans to use some very creepy skills like puppeteer to turn the girls into their personal slaves once they leveled up. Naturally, the nerds tried to warn the class rep, but before they could act, the delinquents hit the required level and made their move. Luckily, the nerds ambushed them, sealed their skills, and saved the day. You'd think that would be the end of it, but no. The delinquents, being the sore losers they are, came back in the dead of night and burned the entire camp down. By the time the nerds returned, everything was destroyed. To top it off, the popular girls somehow blamed the nerds for antagonizing the delinquents. Fed up with the ungrateful crowd, the nerds packed their bags and left. Haruka, feeling a rare pang of empathy, decided to throw them a mushroom feast. He actually enjoyed the company for once, but the next morning, the nerds were off, heading downstream to start their adventuring careers. They invited Haruka to join them, but he turned them down, convinced his trash tier skills would only slow them down. Still, Haruka couldn't stop thinking about the class camp, especially since the class rep was the only other person he liked. So, he set out to check on things. Along the way, a kobold tried to take a bite out of him. After a brief struggle, Haruka came out on top, though slightly chewed up. When he arrived at the camp by nightfall, it was completely deserted. Using one of his tracking skills, Haruka followed the trail and, to his absolute dismay, ran into the last people he wanted to see, the popular girls. Naturally, he turned to book it, but then he heard something that stopped him cold. Please. Wait, what? The popular girls? Saying please? In all the years he'd known them, that word had never left their lips. Something must be seriously wrong. Against his better judgment, Haruka decided to hear them out. To his surprise, they weren't looking to yell at the nerds, they wanted to apologize. Apparently, they finally realized just how much the nerds had been doing for them and felt genuinely guilty. Haruka asked if they were truly ready to go the distance to make things right. The girls broke down crying, admitting they wouldn't last a day on their own in the woods. Desperate, they begged him to teach them how to survive. Haruka, completely caught off guard, agreed before he could stop himself. And bam, his subjugate skill activated, turning the girls into his loyal followers. Now, whenever he gets into a fight, they jump in like overenthusiastic bodyguards, even presenting him magic crystals like puppies waiting for praise. Haruka, not thrilled with his new entourage, tried to help when one of them got a small injury. He handed over a healing potion, only for her to use it on him instead. Seriously, it was getting ridiculous. To make matters worse, Haruka knew he was going to have to explain this whole situation to the class rep, if no, when he ran into her. And, of course, right on cue, the class rep happened to be walking through that very part of the woods. And that's a wrap for episode 2. Haruka's now got the popular girls as his loyal sidekicks. But how's he going to explain this to the class rep? Hit subscribe and like you don't want to miss what's next in this chaotic Ice Guy adventure.